I overheard my husband on the phone saying, "By next month, everything will be ours," to his girlfriend. I said nothing. The next month, I vanished, along with the house, the savings, and his entire future. When he came home that day, he found an empty shell and a note that made him collapse. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The silver was cool and smooth under the cloth. I worked methodically, the practiced motions of polishing the frame, a quiet rhythm in the still afternoon. The photograph inside was from our wedding, two younger faces smiling under a sun that felt, in memory, perpetually warm. I focused on the tarnish around the edges, a dull gray that yielded to a bright shine. That's when his voice, muffled by the closed door of his study, cut through the silence. I paused. Robert was on a call. His tone was unfamiliar, a low conspiratorial laugh I hadn't heard in years. My hand stilled. I told myself to resume polishing, to grant him his privacy. But the laugh came again, followed by words that made the cloth slip from my fingers. "Just be patient, my love. By next month, everything will be ours." The words hung in the air, precise and lethal. My breath caught in my throat, a sharp physical stitch. I didn't move. I became an instrument of pure hearing. "I know, Chloe," he continued, his voice dripping with a placating sweetness he never used with me anymore. "The paperwork is tedious, but it's just logistics. A clean break, that's all. Then we liquidate, and it's a fresh start. The house, the accounts, all of it." Chloe. The name was a splash of acid. I knew it, distantly. A new junior partner at his firm, someone he'd mentioned in passing with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Ambitious," he'd said, "a bit too eager." He was still talking, his words painting a clear, devastating picture. He spoke of valuations, of untangling joint assets, of a month being all he needed to manage the situation. He spoke of our life, the life I had built and maintained for 18 years, as if it were a business portfolio to be divested. And he spoke of me not at all, except as an obstacle to be neatly cleared. The humiliation was not in the betrayal itself, perhaps. It was in the casual, celebratory tone. It was in the way he laughed again, a sound of genuine excitement. It was in the phrase, "clean break." So clinical, erasing nearly 2 decades of shared mornings and quiet dinners and the silent weight of compromise. He was not a man confessing a painful secret. He was a man boasting of a soon-to-be completed coup. A coldness seeped into my veins, starting in my chest and spreading outward, numbing the initial shock. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. I bent, picked up the polishing cloth from the carpet, and folded it neatly. I then picked up the silver frame. The young Vivian in the photograph gazed out, her smile now seeming foolish, her trust a glaring vulnerability. I carried the frame to the mantelpiece. I centered it perfectly between the 2 brass candlesticks, adjusting it a millimeter to the left, then back to the right. The action required focus. It required precision. It grounded me. I walked to the kitchen. The evening light slanted through the bay window, gilding the granite counters I had chosen, the herb garden on the windowsill I tended. The disconnect was absolute. The world outside this moment was calm, beautiful, ordered. Inside me, a foundation had sheared off and collapsed into a void. I opened the wine fridge and selected a bottle of Pinot Noir, a good one from a vineyard we'd visited in Oregon. I used the lever, corkscrew, the pull firm and smooth. I poured a single glass, the rich red liquid catching the light. I did not pour one for him. I took a sip. The taste was complex, notes of dark cherry and earth, a taste I usually savored. Now it was just data, temperature, acidity, texture. I stood at the window, glass in hand, and watched a neighbor walk his dog. The ordinary scene felt like a transmission from another planet. My mind, the analytical mind that had once dissected financial statements for a living, that had managed the intricate budget for this household, kicked into gear. It bypassed the weeping, shattered thing inside me and began to assess. By next month, everything will be ours. The statement was an equation. It had variables: assets, legal standing, time. He assumed control of all variables. He was wrong. I thought of the house. The deed was in my name, a fact he often conveniently forgot. It was not an asset from our marriage. It was mine, inherited from my aunt. He lived in my house. I thought of the investment accounts. Several had been seeded with money from that same inheritance. I thought of the password-protected files on my laptop, the scanned copies of every document I had ever signed. The pain was still there, a vast, howling emptiness. But it was now contained, locked behind a thick pane of glass. On this side of the glass, there was only clarity. Ice-cold, crystalline clarity. He ended his call. I heard the study door open, his footsteps in the hall. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face relaxed, a faint smug smile playing on his lips, the residue of his conversation with Chloe. "Hey, Viv, something smells good." He nodded at the glass in my hand. "Starting without me?" I took another sip, meeting his eyes. My pulse was a slow, steady drum. "Just one glass. Long day." He walked to the fridge, pulled out a beer. "Tell me about it, but things are looking up. Big projects at the firm, lots of potential." "I'm sure," I said, my voice even. I turned back to the window. "Potential is important." He popped the cap and took a long drink, oblivious. He was already miles away in a future he thought was guaranteed. He saw a wife holding a glass of wine, a silent, supportive fixture in his landscape. He did not see the calculation happening behind her eyes. "What's for dinner?" he asked. "I haven't decided yet," I replied. It was the truth. I hadn't decided on dinner, but I had decided on other things. The first moves of a game he didn't know we were playing had already been mapped in my mind. I finished the wine, the glass leaving a clear ring on the counter. I washed it by hand, dried it, and put it away. Each action was deliberate, a ritual of normalcy. As I moved, the phrase echoed, not as a wound, but as a deadline. By next month, everything will be ours. No, Robert, I thought, the coldness solidifying into a core of steel. By next month, everything will be mine. You just don't know it yet. The month starts now. The decision was not a wave of emotion, but a switch being flipped, a circuit closing. The glass I had washed and put away was the last domestic gesture of the old Vivian. The woman who moved through the house after Robert went to bed was someone new, or rather, someone very old, a version of myself I had put aside years ago, the analyst. I did not sleep. I sat at the small desk in the corner of our bedroom, my laptop open. The house was silent save for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and Robert's steady breathing. The glow of the screen was the only light. I began with what I knew for certain, the house. I navigated to the county registrar's website. It took 3 tries to remember the password for the property portal. The deed appeared on the screen. Vivian Elaine Hayes, sole owner. The record of transfer from my aunt's estate was clear. I had purchased Robert's share, a nominal sum to satisfy a quirk of marital property law at the time, with inheritance funds 5 years into our marriage. He had signed the paperwork without reading it, grumbling about legal bureaucracy. "You handle it, Viv. You're better at this stuff." I had handled it, thoroughly. Next, the financial firewall. For years, I had maintained a separate account at a different institution, funded initially by a portion of the inheritance. It was my just-in-case fund, a practice my mother had quietly instilled in me. "A woman needs a runway," she'd said. I had contributed to it sporadically, feeling vaguely guilty for the secrecy. That guilt evaporated. I noted the balance. It was a start, but it was not the weapon. The weapon was the information. Over the next 2 hours, I accessed every joint account, every investment portal, every credit card statement. I downloaded PDFs. I took screenshots. I created a new folder on a secure, encrypted cloud drive he did not know existed. I labeled each file with precise, dispassionate names: Joint Savings Statement Q1, Brokerage, Account Holdings, his 401k summary. A pattern emerged, one I had willfully ignored. The direct deposits from his paychecks went into the joint checking, but the substantial bonuses, the stock options, were routed to an account I had no access to. The statements were mailed to his office. I found a digital trail in his emailed tax documents, which I had filed for us every year. My hands, which had been steady, began to feel a different kind of tension, not shock, but the focused strain of discovery. The numbers told a story of gradual diversion. When the first gray light of dawn touched the windows, I closed the laptop. I had a list of assets, liabilities, and questions. I needed a professional to translate the questions into action. I found her online. Eleanor Vance, Family Law and Asset Protection. Her firm's website was clean, minimalist, with no flashy promises. Her bio stated she had previously worked for a high-net-worth divorce practice before starting her own firm. Strategic dissolutions was the phrase used. I booked a consultation for that afternoon, citing an urgent matter. I used my maiden name, Elaine, and my personal email. Robert left for work at 7:30, whistling. He kissed my cheek, a dry, habitual peck. "Have a good day, dear." I smiled, the expression feeling like a mechanical operation. "You too. Big projects, remember?" The moment his car disappeared down the street, I moved. I went to his study. The room smelled of his cologne and old paper. I did not feel like an intruder. I felt like an auditor. I started with the filing cabinet. I pulled every document related to the house, taxes, investments, and the original partnership agreement for his firm. I used the flatbed scanner connected to his computer, the green light sweeping back and forth with a soft, grinding hum. The sound was methodical, rhythmic. It felt like progress. I packed the originals into my leather tote bag. I also took the external hard drive from his desk drawer, the one he used for backups. I would return it, but not before examining its contents. Eleanor Vance's office was in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel. Her space was quiet, the walls a soft gray. She herself was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense handshake. She did not offer me tea or coffee. She gestured to a chair and sat, opening a fresh legal pad. "You said the matter was urgent, Ms. Elaine. Tell me the situation." I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I laid out the facts in the same order I had organized them in my mind. The overheard conversation. The name, Chloe. The timeline of 1 month. The assets as I understood them. I slid the folder of scanned documents across the polished table. She listened without interruption, her pen making quick, precise notes. When I finished, she was silent for a moment, reviewing the deed first. "This property is yours outright," she confirmed. "The transfer is clean. He has no equitable claim beyond perhaps an argument for the value of improvements, which would be minor." She looked at me. "You understand this changes everything. This isn't a marital asset to be divided. It's your separate property. He is, in essence, a tenant." The word was a bolt of clarity. A tenant. She continued through the financials, her eyebrows lifting slightly at the records of the diverted bonuses. "This is concealment. It speaks to intent. Do you have access to these accounts?" "No. The statements go to his office. We can subpoena them. The fact that you filed taxes, including some of this income, will help establish a pattern." She leaned back. "Your goal, as I understand it, is not reconciliation." "No, my goal is reclamation." The word came out colder than I intended, a faint, approving nod. "Then we proceed on 2 fronts. First, securing and separating your assets. We'll freeze the joint accounts with a legal order, citing the evidence of financial diversion. We'll move your inheritance-seeded funds to a new trust. Second, we begin the process of removing him from your property. Given he is not an owner, we can serve him a notice to vacate. Standard is 30 days. The timeline was perfect. His own deadline turned against him. What about the... I hesitated, searching for the term. The emotional element? Eleanor's gaze was direct. We do not engage with it. We communicate only through legal channels. You do not confront him. You do not warn him. Any emotional reaction from you gives him time to strategize, to hide assets, to construct a narrative. Our power is in the surprise of correct, unilateral action. Let the paperwork do the talking. It speaks louder than shouting. It was exactly what I needed to hear. The plan was no longer a vague storm in my mind. It was a checklist. What is the first step? I asked. You leave here and open a new bank account at a new institution. Today. Then you will sign a series of retainer and authorization documents. I will have my paralegal draft the motion to freeze the joint accounts and the notice to vacate. We will serve the notice at his place of work. It is more formal, and it establishes the seriousness from the first moment he is aware. I signed the papers. The scratch of the pen was decisive. As I stood to leave, Eleanor offered the first hint of something resembling warmth. He believes he is having a conversation with his girlfriend. He does not realize he is already in a negotiation with me, and I am very good at my job. I walked out into the afternoon sun, the weight of the tote bag on my shoulder now a weight of potential. The emotional pain was a distant, muffled echo. In its place was the hum of the scanner, the crispness of the legal pad, the solidity of the deed. I had my lawyer. I had my evidence. I had my plan. The first move was not his. It had just been made. The new bank account was the first tangible thread of my new life. I chose a local credit union across town, one with no branches near Robert's office or our usual haunts. The process was administrative, peaceful. I presented my identification, funded the account with a transfer from my separate savings, and was given a debit card and a checkbook. The checks were plain, blue. They bore only my name. Holding the card felt like holding a key. Back home, with the house empty, I began the digital unraveling. I logged into every joint account. I initiated transfers of exactly 50% of the balance to my new account. The amounts were significant, but not suspiciously so. They mirrored what one might consider a fair preliminary division. The system asked for confirmation. I clicked yes each time. Each transfer was a silent suture, closing a shared vein. Next, I visited the websites of our investment portfolios. I submitted the paperwork Eleanor's office had prepared, authorizing the division of the joint holdings. I stopped the automatic monthly contributions from our checking account that flowed into his retirement fund. I changed the passwords on every utility, every subscription, every online store account, saving the new credentials in a secure manager. I removed his email from all recovery options. I canceled his authorized user status on my one personal credit card, a card he never used but was listed on for emergencies. There would be no more emergencies he could solve. The financial severance was clean, clinical. The physical disentanglement was more complex. I started in the attic. There were boxes there, labeled in my handwriting, Mom's china, Aunt Ruth's linens, college papers. These were my history, my anchors. He had never liked any of it. Clutter, he called it, dust collectors. I carried the boxes down to the spare bedroom, my new staging area. I did not feel sentimental. I felt like a curator assessing the collection. I researched. I took clear, well-lit photographs of my grandmother's porcelain tea set, the Art Deco brooch my aunt left me, the set of first edition novels from my father's library. I created listings on specialized resale sites, pricing them fairly but firmly. The descriptions were factual: provenance, condition, dimensions. I listed them as coming from an estate liquidation. It was not a lie. The first sale was the tea set. A collector from Virginia paid via a secure platform. I packaged it with meticulous care, using the original faded newspaper padding. Driving it to the shipping store felt like delivering a patient to surgery. I deposited the funds directly into my new account. Robert noticed the empty space on the high shelf in the living room a few days later. He was looking for a sports magazine. "Hey," he said, frowning, "where's that old vase thing?" "The cranberry glass?" I asked from the sofa, not looking up from my book. "I sold it. It was just gathering dust. I'm minimalizing." He blinked. "Sold it? For how much?" "Enough." I turned a page. "I've been going through things. We have too much stuff. It feels good to simplify." He stood there for a moment, processing. A part of me braced for an argument, for a claim of ownership, but his face relaxed into a shrug. "Sure. Okay. If you think so. Extra cash is always good." He found his magazine and left the room. The transaction was complete. He had accepted the narrative and appreciated the profit. His greed validated my strategy. I continued. A lacquered cabinet disappeared from the hallway. A Persian rug I'd inherited was rolled and taken by a delighted interior designer. Each item that left the house made the space feel lighter, emptier in a way that was purposeful, not desolate. The money accumulated. One evening, he came home as I was sealing a box containing silver flatware. "Another one?" he asked, hanging up his coat. "The pattern is outdated," I said, "and it's sterling. The money is better than letting it tarnish in a drawer." He walked over, peered at the box. "How much do you get for that?" "A few thousand." He whistled, a low, impressed sound. "Not bad. Maybe we should sell that ugly landscape in the dining room next." "Maybe," I agreed. The landscape was a print he had bought. It was worth nothing. I let the comment hang. His complicity was the most powerful tool. By framing it as a shared benefit, extra cash simplifying, I made him an unwitting accomplice in the dismantling of his own environment. He saw profit, not erosion. He would praise my initiative over dinner, talking about how clever it was to turn old things into money, completely unaware that the foundation of the life he was planning to claim was being quietly sold off piece by piece from under him. I began to pack my own things, the items he had no interest in, my books, my professional files from my old analyst job, my photography equipment, my clothing. I bought banker's boxes and stacked them neatly in the spare room. He saw them once. "Spring cleaning?" he joked. "Something like that," I said. "It's time to get organized." The most satisfying action was the most invisible. Using the attorney's authorization, I placed a hold on the joint checking and savings accounts. The mechanism was a legal order, citing the ongoing financial separation. It did not empty them, it froze them. From the outside, the accounts looked normal, but no checks could clear, no transfers could be made without my signature or a court order. The direct deposits from his paycheck would hit the account and simply stop, trapped. He would not discover this until he tried to use the money. My days took on a rhythm. Mornings were for administrative tasks, calls with Eleanor's paralegal, tracking shipments, updating spreadsheets. Afternoons were for packing and listing. Evenings were for performance. I cooked dinner. I asked about his day. I listened to him talk about the potential at the firm, about Chloe's clever contributions to a presentation. I nodded and passed the salt. The anger was there, a solid, cold stone in my gut. But it was useful. Every anecdote about her, every oblivious, smug smile, was another brick in the wall of my resolve. It was no longer about heartbreak. It was about physics. For every action he had taken, I was preparing an equal and opposite reaction. The house began to echo slightly. The rooms felt larger. The process was like watching a tree being carefully defoliated. The structure remained, but the life was quietly being packed away. He saw only the clearing of clutter, the welcome influx of cash. He did not see the blueprint. He did not see that I was not just cleaning house, I was conducting an audit, and he had already failed. The performance required more discipline than the strategy. The strategy was logic, executed in silence. The performance was emotional labor conducted in real time. Every day, I had to become the woman Robert expected to see, attentive, supportive, vaguely preoccupied with domestic details. I had to erase the calculation from my eyes and the finality from my posture. I began with his favorite meal. It was a deliberate choice. Beef Wellington with a red wine reduction, roasted asparagus, and Duchess potatoes. The recipe was complex, time-consuming, involving pastry and precise temperatures. It was a dish I made for anniversaries or to celebrate his promotions. Cooking it now was a signal, but not the one he would interpret. For him, it would signal normalcy, even affection. For me, it was a test of my own control. Could I carefully fold puff pastry around a filet while thinking about the notice to vacate sitting in my lawyer's drawer? I moved through the kitchen with an economy of motion I had cultivated over years. The beef seared in the pan, the scent rich and savory. I prepared the duxelles, chopping the mushrooms finely. The process was meditative. Each step was a fact. Sear, cool, wrap, chill, bake. There was no room for error and no room for emotion. He arrived home just as I was pulling the golden brown pastry from the oven. The sight of it made him smile, a genuine, unguarded expression of pleasure. "Wow, what's the occasion?" "No occasion," I said, placing it on the trivet to rest. "I just felt like making something special. You've been working hard." The lie was smooth, delivered with a slight, weary smile of my own. "You're amazing," he said, coming to kiss my temple. He smelled of his office and his cologne. I did not flinch. During dinner, I asked about his work. I used my standard questions, the ones that showed interest without demanding depth. How did the presentation go? Is the Thompson account settled? He talked, expanding under the gentle pressure of my attention. He spoke of challenges, of office politics, of his vision for his team. And then his phone, face down on the table beside his plate, buzzed. A short, distinct vibration. His eyes flicked toward it just for an instant. A fraction of a second of diverted attention. His sentence didn't falter, but something in his face shifted, a subtle inward focus. He finished his thought, took a sip of wine, and then casually picked up the phone. "Sorry, might be the office. They've been having server issues all day." He tapped the screen. I watched his eyes scan the message. The corner of his mouth lifted, not into a full smile, but into something private, knowing. It was the same expression I had heard in his voice through the study door. It was the look of a man who believes he is getting away with something. "Everything okay?" I asked, cutting a piece of beef. The meat was perfectly medium rare. Oh yes, just IT sending an update. All resolved." He put the phone back down, screen dark. "This is incredible, Viv. Really. I'm glad you like it." I took a bite. The food tasted like nothing to me. It was texture and temperature. The conversation resumed. He was more animated now, buoyed by the secret communication. He began to talk in broader, more grandiose terms about the future. "You know, I've been thinking, in a year or two we could be in a completely different place. Maybe a vacation home or a boat. The firm's trajectory is really promising." "That sounds exciting," I said, nodding. "A boat? You've always talked about that." He had. He'd talked about it with me years ago. Now he was likely repackaging the same dream for a different audience. Exactly. It's all about positioning now, making the right moves at the right time. He leaned back, satisfied. He saw a wife admiring his ambition. He did not see an archivist recording his testimony. Later, while he watched television in the living room, I cleaned the kitchen. Through the doorway, I could see the blue light of the screen playing over his relaxed face. His personal phone was in his hand, his thumbs moving slowly over the screen. He thought he was hidden by the noise of the program and the distance between us. He would smile at the phone, a soft, intimate smile he never gave me anymore. Then he would glance toward the kitchen doorway, a quick, furtive check. Seeing me wiping the counter, he would return his attention to the screen, his expression reverting to one of casual viewing. Each smile was a data point. Each furtive glance was a confirmation. The humiliation I had felt that first day did not return as a wave of pain. It returned as a steady, low-voltage current, powering my resolve. This was not a man torn by guilt or conflict. This was a man comfortably inhabiting two worlds, confident in his ability to manage both. His arrogance was his critical vulnerability. My performance extended beyond him. There were social obligations, a dinner party with another couple from his firm. I wore a dress he liked, made polite conversation about real estate and school districts. I laughed at the appropriate moments. I praised the hostess's dessert. When Robert put his hand on the small of my back, I did not stiffen. I leaned into the touch, a brief, wifely gesture. I saw the other husband nod, approving of the stable, supportive partner. The performance was flawless. Afterward, in the car, Robert said, "You were great tonight. The Mitchells were really impressed with you." "Thank you," I said, looking out the window at the passing streetlights. "They're nice people." "They are. It's good for networking." He was already calculating the professional value of the evening. He did not ask if I had enjoyed myself. The duality was complete. His world was one of surfaces and strategy, where I was a component. My world was now one of deep, subterranean planning, where he was the target. Our interactions were like two overlapping maps of the same territory, each with entirely different landmarks. The hardest part was the silence. Not the silence of the house, but the silence I had to maintain. The urge to scream, to fling the facts in his face, to watch his smug assurance shatter, was a physical pressure in my chest. But I remembered Eleanor Vance's words. Any emotional reaction gives him time to strategize. My power was in the surprise of correct, unilateral action. So I polished the silver. I cooked the meals. I asked about his day. I performed the role of Vivian Hayes, the wife, with a meticulous, detached precision. And all the while, I listened. I watched. I documented. Every secret smile, every whispered phone call after I'd gone upstairs, every mention of potential and next month was another brick in the wall I was building between his old life and his new reality. The performance was not for him. It was for the clock. It kept the hands turning, moving steadily toward the day. The first legal document would arrive, and the curtain would finally fall. The notice to vacate was signed, notarized, and entered into the court record on a Tuesday morning. Eleanor called me at 9:15. "The process server is en route to his office now. He will be served within the hour. Do not answer your phone if he calls. Let him sit with it." I thanked her and hung up. I was in the spare bedroom, which was now more than half filled with neatly stacked boxes. A label maker sat on the desk. I finished labeling a box Vivian Winter Coats and pressed it firmly onto the cardboard. The action was mundane. The significance of the hour was not. I had anticipated anxiety, a racing heart, a need to pace. Instead, I felt a profound stillness. The first domino was no longer in my hand. It had been placed on the board and pushed. The physics were now in motion. I continued packing my off-season clothing. At 10:37, my phone lit up on the desk. Robert's name appeared on the screen. The call went to voicemail. I did not listen to it. I folded a cashmere sweater and placed it in the box. He called again at 10:42 and then at 10:50, a pattern of escalating frequency. I pictured him in his office, the formal document on his desk, his initial confusion hardening into a first prickling of alarm. He would be reading it again, parsing the legalese. Notice to vacate premises. Owner, Vivian E. Hayes. Tenant, Robert Hayes. 30:30. Days from service of this notice. The phone was silent for 20 minutes. Then it began again. This time, he called 3 times in 5 minutes. I imagined his confusion twisting into frustration. He would be trying to reconcile the cold, official language with the woman who had made beef Wellington 2 nights prior. The cognitive dissonance would be jarring. I left the phone in the spare room and walked downstairs. I made a pot of tea. I wiped down the already clean kitchen counters. I was a woman in her home, performing simple tasks. The world outside this kitchen was shifting, but in here, the water boiled, the tea steeped, the cloth moved in circular motions on the granite. At 11:20, my phone buzzed with a text message. I finished pouring my tea before going to look at it. Robert, did you get some kind of legal paperwork sent to the house? Something about the property? I waited 5 minutes. Then I replied, my tone crafted to be innocently puzzled. Me. No, nothing here. What does it say? His response was immediate. Robert, it's insane. It's a notice to vacate. It says I have to move out in 30 days. It has to be some mistake. It says you're the owner. Me. That's strange. Maybe it's a scam? They do that sometimes. Did you call the county clerk to verify? I was directing him into bureaucratic channels, buying time. He would spend the next hour on hold being transferred, only to have the document's validity confirmed. Every minute he spent untangling the administrative knot was a minute he wasn't confronting me. Robert, it looks real. The case number checks out. I'm calling my lawyer. Me. Of course. Let me know what they say. Maybe it's related to that tax filing issue from years ago? I offered another dead end, a plausible but complex diversion. He didn't reply. I ate my lunch at the kitchen island. The silence from my phone was now filled with his frantic activity. I could visualize it. Calls to his personal attorney who would be confused and request a copy. Calls to the property management company we had never hired. Him pulling up the county database on his computer and seeing my name, solitary and definitive, on the deed. He arrived home early just after 3 in the afternoon. I heard his car door shut with more force than usual. His footsteps on the front walk were quick, heavy. I was in the living room reading a book. I looked up as he entered, my expression one of mild concern. What's going on, Vivian? He stood in the doorway, his coat still on, a folded paper in his hand. His face was flushed, his brow furrowed in genuine bewilderment rather than anger. The anger would come later. This was the stage of pure, uncomprehending shock. What do you mean? I closed my book, keeping a finger in my page. This! He thrust the notice toward me. This came to my office. A process server handed it to me. It says you're evicting me. I took the paper, giving it a careful, slow read even though I knew every word. I let my eyes widen slightly. This is addressed to you, at this address, but it says I'm the owner. I looked up at him, injecting confusion into my voice. How can I evict you from our house? That's what I'm asking you. His voice rose, tinged with exasperation. Is this some kind of joke? Did you sign something without reading it? I shook my head slowly, thinking. No, but, the house is in my name, Robert. From Aunt Ruth. We did that refinancing years ago. I stated it as a distant factual recollection, a minor detail he had forgotten. He blinked. The fact, long buried under years of assumed marital unity, surfaced. That's just a formality. That doesn't mean you own it. We're married. It's marital property. I'm sure you're right, I said soothingly, handing the notice back to him. It must be a terrible mistake, a clerical error. Your lawyer will sort it out. I was mirroring the calm, problem-solving wife. I was validating his assumption that this was an external nuisance, not a targeted strike. Some of the tension left his shoulders. The narrative I offered, a stupid error, a bureaucrat's mistake, was far more comforting than the truth. He ran a hand through his hair. Yeah, he's looking into it. It's just humiliating, having this delivered to my office. I'm sorry that happened, I said, and I almost meant it. I was sorry for the humiliation. It was a necessary component. Do you want a drink? You look stressed. He nodded, finally taking off his coat. Please, scotch. I made his drink, the ice cubes clinking softly. As I handed it to him, I said, try not to worry. These things happen. It will get straightened out. The words were a gentle pat on the back, pushing him further into complacency. He took a long swallow. "You're probably right. It's just a shock." He looked around the living room at the spaces where my inherited pieces had been. The room was leaner, brighter. He didn't seem to notice the absence. He was looking for reassurance in the familiar walls. "It's just our house." I smiled, a small, tight smile. "It is." My house, I did not say. The first legal fact had been served. He was now officially a tenant with a ticking clock, and he still believed it was a mistake. The game was no longer just in my mind. It was on paper, and he was holding it. Robert's lawyer, a corporate attorney named Daniels, spent 3 days investigating the notice to vacate. I know this because Robert gave me updates, each one more frustrated than the last. Daniels says the deed is clear. He's trying to find a precedent, some kind of spousal equity argument. He said this over dinner, pushing his food around his plate. The confusion was slowly fermenting into a low-grade anxiety. He was being forced to think about the house as a legal entity, not just a home. It was an intellectual problem for him still, an inconvenience. The financial freeze would not be an intellectual problem. It began on a Friday. I had scheduled it that way. Banks move slower over the weekend. Problems solidify. I was already in my new apartment, a spacious, sunlit unit in a secure building overlooking the river. The movers had brought the boxes of my personal belongings the day before. All that remained in the house were the furniture we had purchased together, the basics of his daily life, and the performance I would soon conclude. From my new balcony, I watched the morning light on the water. I had a second phone, a new one, registered to my new address. My old phone lay on the glass table beside me, silent. I waited. The first call came at 9:18 a.m. Robert's name flashed on the screen. I imagined him at his usual cafe, ordering his large black coffee and breakfast sandwich. The card would have been declined. He would have frowned, tried it again. Then he would have used a different card. The second decline would have sparked a different kind of confusion, sharper than the legal notice. Money is immediate. Money is tangible. The phone rang until it went to voicemail. It lit up again at 9:22 and again at 9:25. The frequency was urgent. He was no longer standing in a queue. He was stepping outside, punching numbers into his phone. I knew the sequence. He would call the customer service number on the back of the card. He would navigate the automated system, enter his account details, and finally reach a human. The representative, following protocol, would inform him that the account was currently restricted per a court-ordered freeze related to pending asset proceedings. They would direct him to contact the legal department. They would be polite, firm, and utterly unhelpful. My old phone buzzed with a text. "Robert, are you having issues with your cards? My cards are being declined." I did not respond. Let him marinate in the isolation of a problem with no quick fix. The calls continued, a staccato rhythm of panic. Between calls, he would be trying other accounts, logging into online banking, encountering the same digital walls. He would discover the joint savings and checking accounts were also frozen. The direct deposit from his paycheck that had hit that morning would be inaccessible. His financial liquidity had evaporated in the span of an hour. By 11, the tone of the missed calls changed. The early ones were short, likely cut off by him when he got a busy signal or decided to try another card. The later ones rang the full duration. He was letting them ring, hoping I would pick up, needing to hear a voice that could explain this away. The silence from my end was its own answer. At 11:47, my new phone buzzed. It was Eleanor Vance. "The restraining order on the accounts is in full effect," she said. "My office has fielded 2 calls from his attorney already. They are demanding explanations. We are providing them with the case number and the judge's order. They have no standing to reverse it without a hearing, which we have scheduled for 3 weeks from now. He is effectively locked out." "Thank you, Eleanor." "He will likely go home now. Are you prepared?" "I am not there," I said. "I'm at the spa, a full-day treatment, booked weeks ago." It was the alibi I had planted in casual conversation the prior week. Perfect. Do not engage. Let him sit in the empty space. I ended the call and looked at my old phone. It was alive with light, buzzing almost constantly now as it filled with notifications, missed calls, voicemails, text messages. The texts evolved from confusion to accusation. Robert. Vivian, answer your phone. This is serious. Robert. The bank says our accounts are frozen. What did you do? Robert. I'm coming home. We need to talk right now. I pictured him leaving his office, his face pale, his movements jerky. He would drive too fast. He would burst through the front door, calling my name. He would find a house that was quieter than usual, subtly emptier but still functional. He would not find me. From my balcony, I visualized the scene. He would pace the living room, the same room where he had laughed on the phone with Chloe. He would call my name up the stairs. He would check the garage, see my car gone. He would return to the kitchen, maybe pour himself a drink with a shaking hand. He would try my phone again and again, each call dropping into the void. The texts became more desperate. Robert. Where are you? Robert. Vivian, this isn't funny. What is going on? Robert. Call me, please. The please was satisfying. It was the sound of his control fracturing. He was in a maze of his own making, but the walls were made of paperwork I had filed. As the afternoon wore on, the texts stopped. The calls became less frequent. He was moving into a new phase. Frantic research, calls to his lawyer, to the bank's legal department, to anyone who could give him a lever to move the world back into its proper alignment. He would be learning, in real time, about the mechanisms I had set in motion. He would be told about hearings and dates and procedures. He would realize that the mistake was a coordinated campaign. I prepared a simple dinner for myself in my new kitchen, the view of the river a peaceful expanse. My old phone sat on the counter, a dark, silent rectangle. Occasionally, it would light up once more, a final, weak pulse of his bewilderment and rage. Each vibration was a confirmation. The net was tight, and he was thrumming against it. He was alone in the house I owned, with no access to the money he had taken for granted, with a legal clock ticking toward his eviction, and with the dawning, horrifying realization that his wife was not missing by accident. She was missing by design. The performance of normalcy was over. The first act of the reckoning had begun, and he was on stage alone, with no lines, no cues, and no idea of what came next. I watched the lights of the city begin to twinkle on the water, feeling nothing but a deep, quiet calm. I returned to the house at 6 o'clock the following evening. The sky was a deep twilight blue. I parked my car in the driveway, gathered my bag, and walked to the front door, as I had done thousands of times before. The difference was in the quality of the silence that greeted me when I turned the key. It was a waiting silence. He was in the living room, standing in the middle of the floor, as if he had been planted there. The lights were off, but the room was dimly lit by the street lamp outside. He had not shaved. His shirt was wrinkled. The controlled confusion from the day of the notice was gone, replaced by a raw, vibrating anger. "Where have you been?" The question shot across the room, sharp and demanding. I closed the door softly, placed my bag on the console table, and hung my coat on the hook. I had appointments. Then I went grocery shopping. I held up a reusable bag from the upmarket grocer he preferred. "Appointments." He spat the word. "Your phone was off for 24 hours. The bank accounts are frozen. I got a notice to vacate my own home. What kind of game are you playing, Vivian?" "It's not a game, Robert." I walked past him toward the kitchen, the bag of groceries in my arms. I could feel his eyes boring into my back. I began unpacking. Fresh salmon, asparagus, lemons, a small container of caviar. I filled a pot with water for pasta and set it on the stove. I turned on the oven to preheat. He followed me, standing in the kitchen doorway, a dark silhouette. "Stop it. Stop acting normal. What did you do? What did you sign?" I rinsed the asparagus, my movements slow and deliberate. I consulted a lawyer, Eleanor Vance. Her office filed the necessary paperwork to protect my assets once I became aware of your intention to liquidate them. The house is my separate property. The account freeze is a standard temporary restraining order pending the division of what few actual marital assets exist. It's all very procedural. The use of the legal terms, delivered in my flat, informative tone, seemed to enrage him further. Your assets, your property. We are married. Everything is ours. You can't just lock me out. I turned to face him, my hands resting on the edge of the cool granite counter. That's what you said, wasn't it? On the phone, to Chloe. I let the name sit in the air between us. By next month, everything will be ours. I believe that was the phrase. All the color drained from his face. His mouth opened, then closed. The angry momentum he had built shattered into pure, uncomprehending shock. He took a step back as if physically pushed. What? I was polishing the silver. The frame from our wedding. You were in your study. The door was closed, but the house was quiet. I heard the whole conversation. My voice was disturbingly even, a recitation of facts. The plans for the clean break, the liquidation, the timeline. You sounded quite happy. He stared at me, his eyes wide, searching my face for the hurt, the hysteria, the emotional reaction he could fight against. He found only a calm, observant blankness. It terrified him. You heard that? I did. And you didn't say anything? You've been planning this? He waved a hand vaguely, encompassing the legal chaos that had descended on him. I realized a confrontation would be pointless. You had already made your decision. You'd already moved on. So I began to do the same. I just started a bit earlier than you anticipated. I turned back to the salmon, seasoning it with salt and pepper. I'm simply ahead of schedule. The oven beeped, signaling it was preheated. I placed the salmon on a tray and slid it inside. I added salt to the boiling water and put in the pasta. He was silent for a long moment, the only sounds the hum of the oven and the bubbling pot. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, frayed. Vivian, it wasn't what you think. Chloe, it's a complication. I was going to tell you. We could have talked about this. I turned and looked at him, really looked at him. The excuses were pathetic, the transparent lies of a man caught. Were you going to tell me before or after you emptied the accounts and filed for divorce? Your tone on the phone suggested the latter. It suggested celebration. He had no answer. He leaned against the doorframe, his earlier anger deflated, replaced by a dawning, sickening understanding. He was not dealing with a wronged wife. He was dealing with a counterparty who had read the contract and called his bluff. So this is it? You're destroying me over a mistake? I'm not destroying you, Robert. I'm separating from you. The destruction is a side effect of your own plans being applied to you rather than to me. You are experiencing the consequences of your own strategy. I am merely the instrument. I stirred the pasta. Would you like a drink? I'm having wine. He let out a choked sound, something between a laugh and a sob. You're unbelievable. I learned from the best. I poured a glass of Sauvignon Blanc. I did not pour one for him. We ate at the dining table. I had set 2 places with the everyday china. The salmon was perfect, the pasta al dente. It was a good meal. He picked at his food, his eyes darting from his plate to my face and back again. He was trying to find a crack, a way back in. We can fix this, he said finally, his voice low, pleading. We can go to counseling. I'll end it with Chloe. This legal warfare, it doesn't have to go this far. The legal proceedings are already in motion, I said, taking a sip of wine. They are based on evidence and fact. Your change of heart, if that's what this is, doesn't alter the fact that you concealed assets and plotted to dispossess me. The court is interested in actions, Robert, not apologies after the fact. "What do you want?" he asked, a desperate edge returning. "Money? Fine. Take more. What's your price to make this stop?" I put my fork down. "I wanted the life I built. You tried to take that, so I took it back. The price was already paid by me over 18 years. There's no further negotiation. You have 22 days left on the notice to vacate. I suggest you use them to find a new residence." He pushed his plate away, his appetite gone. He looked old and tired and small. The arrogant man from the study was gone. In his place was a stranger, hollowed out by the sudden reversal of his world. "You're cruel." "No," I said, finishing the last bite on my plate. "I'm thorough. There's a difference. Cruelty would have been screaming, throwing things, giving you the emotional scene you could have used to paint me as unstable. This is just business. You taught me that. Our marriage was a business arrangement for you. I have simply concluded it." I stood and began to clear the table. "I'll be staying elsewhere tonight. The house is yours until the end of the notice period. I'd appreciate it if you didn't damage the property." I took my wineglass to the kitchen, washed it, and placed it in the drying rack. I collected my bag and coat. He hadn't moved from the table. He sat staring at the empty space where his plate had been. As I walked past the dining room toward the front door, I paused. For what it's worth, the beef Wellington was a test. You passed. You didn't notice a thing. I left him there, in the quiet house, with the taste of a perfectly cooked meal and the crushing weight of his own miscalculation. The Last Supper was over. The performance was complete. All that remained was the exit. The movers arrived at 8 in the morning. I had scheduled them weeks ago, under the guise of a long-distance relocation for a family member. The company was reputable, efficient, and expensive. Their large white truck blocked the driveway. 3 men in uniform shirts exited, clipboard in hand. I was already there, waiting. I had let myself in at 7. The house was quiet, still holding the stale silence of Robert's shock from the night before. He had left for work early, a pattern I had anticipated. He would be seeking solutions at his office, a place where he still felt some semblance of control. It was the perfect window. "Ms. Elaine?" the foreman asked, consulting his paperwork. I had used my maiden name. That's me. I handed him my own clipboard, a detailed inventory and floor plan I had prepared. Everything marked with a blue sticker goes. Furniture, boxes, appliances. Everything with a yellow sticker stays. The items with yellow are to be gathered in the center of the living room. Is that clear? He scanned the list, nodded. Clear. The yellow stickered items are not being moved, just consolidated. Correct. Let's start with the master bedroom and the spare room. All boxes are pre-packed and labeled. Furniture is to be disassembled per the instructions taped to each piece. They moved with a disciplined rhythm. I stood in the hallway, my clipboard in hand, and watched the life I had curated get systematically dismantled. The large cherrywood bed frame came apart under their tools. They wrapped the headboard in moving blankets. The dresser, my dresser, was emptied. I had already removed all clothing and carried out. The matching nightstands went, followed by the reading lamps, the rug, the framed art from the walls. I followed them into each room, a supervisor in my own dissolution. In the living room, they rolled up the remaining area rug, exposing the pale, polished floorboards. They unplugged and wrapped the television, the sound system, the elegant floor lamps. The bookcases, now empty of my books, were taken apart and carried to the truck. Each item that crossed the threshold made the space larger, brighter, and profoundly hollow. The kitchen was next, the stand mixer, a professional model I used for baking, the set of stainless steel pots and pans, a wedding gift from my colleagues, the espresso machine, the small kitchen television. I directed them to leave the basic pots, the cheap cutlery set, the old microwave. Those were his, or were things I had no use for. The dining room table, a solid piece of oak we had bought together, was disassembled with care. The chairs were stacked and carried out. The sideboard, which had held my silver and china, was empty and followed the table. Sunlight streamed through the now unobstructed windows, painting rectangles of light on the bare floor. The men worked without unnecessary conversation. The only sounds were their firm footsteps, the rustle of wrapping paper, the low thumps of furniture being set down in the truck, and their occasional brief confirmations with me. "This side table has a yellow sticker, ma'am. Stays?" "Yes." "Place it in the living room pile." By midday, the truck was 2/3 full. The house was an echo chamber. Voices and footsteps bounced off the naked walls and empty floors. The air smelled of dust and clean floor wax, no longer of cooked meals or flowers or the faint citrus of my cleaning sprays. I walked through the barren rooms. The master bedroom was just a square space with a closet door. The living room was a vast expanse of floor leading to a fireplace. The kitchen looked like a model home, devoid of the clutter of life. It was neither sad nor nostalgic. It was a space being reset to zero. The final task was the consolidation of his things. Following my instructions, the movers gathered the yellow stickered items: his outdated stereo system, his collection of sports memorabilia in a cardboard box, his weights and gym bag, a few suits hanging in the otherwise empty closet, his toiletries from the bathroom counter, a box of his personal files from the study. They placed it all in a neat, sad pile in the exact center of the living room. It looked like an island of stranded belongings in a sea of floor. The foreman approached me, his clipboard now complete with check marks. "That's the last of the blue sticker items, ma'am. The truck is loaded. We'll need you to follow us to the destination for unloading." "I'll be right behind you," I said. I signed his paperwork, handed him a cash tip for the crew, and gave him the address of my new apartment's loading dock. The truck pulled away, a large blank-sided rectangle that held my past. I was left alone in the shell of the house. The silence was absolute now, deeper than before. I took one final walk through. Every room was clean, swept, empty. The sunlight felt intrusive, illuminating corners that had been in shadow for years. The house was no longer a home. It was a structure, a vessel I had emptied. I returned to the living room. I looked at the pile of his possessions. It was not a large pile. It represented the physical entirety of his claim to this place, and it was pitifully small. I felt nothing. No triumph, no sorrow. It was a job that had been completed correctly. From my bag, I took a single sheet of paper. I did not place it on the pile. I left it on the floor, 6 inches from the edge of his things, where he would see it immediately. It was weighted down with the old house key. Then I walked out. I did not look back. I pulled the front door closed behind me, hearing the solid click of the lock. The sound was final. I got into my car and drove away from the curb, following the route the moving truck had taken, toward the river, toward the new space that was already filled with light and waiting for the pieces of my life to be reassembled. The vanishment was not yet complete for him, but for me, I had already left. All that remained was the aftermath, and I would not be there to witness it. He returned to the house at 7:15 that evening. I know the exact time because my security system, which I still controlled remotely, sent a notification to my phone. Front door. User, Robert, disarmed. I was in my new apartment, unpacking a box of books. I placed the phone on the shelf and continued working. I did not need to watch. I knew the sequence. The first thing he would notice was the lack of resistance. The door would swing open too easily, without the usual subtle buffer of furniture and rugs absorbing sound. The click of the latch would echo. I imagine he stood in the foyer for a moment, calling out, "Vivian!" His voice would have sounded loud in the void, swallowed by the empty space. No answer. He would have flicked the light switch. The overhead fixture would blaze, illuminating the bare floor of the living room, the walls stripped of art, the empty spaces where the couch and chairs and tables had been. His footsteps, usually muffled, would have been sharp and distinct on the hardwood. He would have walked into the living room, his head turning, his mind trying to reconcile the memory of the room with the reality. He would have seen the pile, a jumble of his belongings, a pathetic heap in the center of the vast, empty floor, and beside it, a single white sheet of paper, anchored by a key. He would have approached slowly. He would have bent down, his knees cracking, and picked up the paper. He would have read it standing there under the harsh ceiling light, in the middle of the nothingness. I did not write a long letter. I did not explain my feelings. I stated facts. Robert. The notice to vacate expires in 21 days. This key provides access until then. All utilities remain in my name and will be terminated on that date. Your personal effects are here. Anything left after the deadline will be considered abandoned and disposed of. The joint accounts remain frozen per court order. Your personal accounts, to which I never had access, are of course yours. The retainer for your attorney, Daniels, has been paid from the joint funds, as per the last statement. Future payments are your responsibility. The divorce petition has been filed. Your attorney has been served. Eleanor Vance of Vance & Associates represents me. All communication should go through her. You were correct about one thing. By next month, everything will indeed be mine. Vivian, I did not sign it with love. I signed it with my name. He would have read it once, then again. The final line would have landed with the force of a physical blow. By next month, everything will indeed be mine. His own words thrown back at him in this hollowed-out context. The celebratory promise to Chloe now sounded like an epitaph for his own future. The security system recorded no sound, but it registered motion. The log shows he remained in the living room area for 47 minutes. He did not move to the kitchen or the bedrooms. He stayed by the pile. I picture him sinking down, not in a controlled sitting, but in a slow collapse, his legs giving way. He would have ended up on the floor, his back against his own box of sports memorabilia, the note clutched in his hand. The sheer scale of the emptiness would have pressed in on him. Every direction he looked, there was nothing. No couch to sit on, no television to glare at, no lamp to turn on. Just walls, windows, and floor, and his small, sad island of stuff. He would have thought of Chloe then, the promise of a new life. A fresh start with the liquidated assets of his old one. He would have realized that the assets were gone, the life was gone, and the woman waiting for him was expecting a man of means, not a tenant with 21 days left and a pile of boxes in an empty house. The call would have been inevitable. My phone, the old one, began to ring at 7:53, Robert's name. It rang 15 times in succession. Then it switched to texts, a barrage of them. Robert, what did you do? Robert, where is everything? Robert, answer me. Robert, you can't do this. Robert, I'm calling the police. He did call the police. I know because Eleanor Vance called me at 8:20. A police officer just contacted my office. They performed a wellness check at the property. Your husband reported a burglary. The officer found him there with the notice to vacate and the divorce filing. I explained the situation, provided the case numbers. The officer informed him it was a civil matter and left. He is still there. Thank you, Eleanor. The texts continued, becoming more fragmented. Robert, the police won't help. Robert, talk to me, please. Robert, I have nowhere to go. I did not respond. The power was not in answering. The power was in the silence and in the empty space that echoed it. At some point, he must have called Chloe. I can only speculate on that conversation, but the timing fits. The final text came through at 9:07. It was not from Robert. It was from a number I did not recognize, but the area code was the same as his office. Unknown. This is Chloe. What have you done to him? He's a mess. He says you took everything. You heartless bitch. I read the message once, then I blocked the number. It was the only communication I received from her, and it was perfect. It confirmed everything. She was not calling to offer him solace or a place to stay. She was calling to accuse me of ruining her plans. Her concern was for the asset she had lost, not the man. I imagined the rest of his night. Sitting on the floor in the dark, the house unheated because the thermostat was programmed to a minimal setting. Maybe he opened a box, pulled out a blanket. Maybe he just sat staring at the shadows, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of an empty house, the creak of settling timber, the hum of the refrigerator in the distant kitchen, the distant rush of a car on the street outside. He had become a ghost in his own life. Or more accurately, he had been evicted from a life he had only ever been inhabiting on my sufferance. The shell he was left with was not just the house. It was his future. The note was not an explanation, it was a mirror. It showed him the reflection of his own actions, and the reflection was barren. I finished unpacking my books and arranged them on the shelf by the window overlooking the water. The apartment was warm, filled with the familiar shapes of my furniture under soft lamplight. The silence here was a comfortable one, a chosen quiet. I thought of him, on the floor in the dark, and I felt no pity. I felt the simple, clean satisfaction of a problem solved, an equation balanced. The account was settled. The empty shell was his to inhabit for 21 more days. The morning sun on the water was a fact, not a metaphor. It came through the east-facing windows of my apartment and laid a brilliant, shifting path across the pale wood floors. I stood at the counter grinding coffee beans. The sound was a crisp, familiar rhythm. The view was a permanent expanse of blue and light. I had chosen it for the light. Eleanor Vance arrived at 10. I buzzed her up. She entered carrying a slim briefcase and a bottle of champagne. She placed the briefcase on the dining table and the bottle on the counter. "A small celebration," she said. "The final hearing was this morning." He defaulted. He didn't show. I was not surprised. What does that mean exactly? It means the divorce is granted. The division of assets is finalized per our submitted agreement, which the judge approved. The house is yours, free and clear. The frozen funds have been legally divided, with the majority returning to your separate estate, given the provenance of the capital. He retains his personal accounts and his vehicle. The eviction stands. He was removed from the property yesterday by a sheriff's deputy for failing to vacate. His belongings were placed in storage at his expense for 30 days. She spoke in clean, bullet-point sentences. "It's over." I opened the champagne. It was a good vintage. I poured 2 glasses. We did not clink them. We simply held them for a moment in the sunlight. "Thank you, Eleanor, for your precision." It was a straightforward case, once the facts were organized, she said. He helped considerably by not engaging counsel effectively after the initial shock. His attorney filed a few procedural motions, but without his client's coherent instructions or financial resources to fund a protracted fight, they went nowhere. She took a sip. "This is an excellent view." "It is." I looked out at the water. "What happens to him now?" She set her glass down. "That is no longer your concern, legally or otherwise, but based on the information available, his position at the firm is untenable. The personal financial distress, the eviction, the emotional public displays." "Displays?" Eleanor opened her briefcase and took out her tablet. She pulled up a social media page and turned it toward me. It was Chloe's profile. The most recent post was a blurred, angry paragraph about liars and false promises, tagged to no one, but the timing and tone were clear. The comments were full of speculative emojis and questions. The post beneath it was a professional headshot of Robert from the firm's website with the caption, "Future Partner Material." From 6 months ago, the juxtaposition was brutal. "It seems the reality of his situation did not meet her expectations," Eleanor said dryly. "She has been vocal in certain circles. Word travels. In a professional services firm, perception is stability. His has collapsed." I handed the tablet back. I felt no schadenfreude. It was simply another data point confirming the predictable outcome of a flawed plan. "And the house?" "Legally yours. Do you intend to sell?" Yes, I've already contacted an agent. The proceeds will go into a new investment portfolio. I'm considering starting a small consulting firm for financial literacy for women leaving transitions. Eleanor nodded, a flicker of genuine approval in her eyes. A good use of capital and experience. I can refer clients. We finished our champagne. She left the bottle. After she was gone, the apartment settled back into its quiet. I cleared the glasses. I sat at the table with my new ledger, a simple leather-bound book. On the first page, I wrote the date and the word beginnings. I listed my assets, the proceeds from the sold heirlooms, the settled funds from the divorce, the upcoming sale of the house. I listed my liabilities, none. I outlined a budget for the next year, including a line item for charitable donations to a local women's shelter. I sketched a business plan for the consulting idea. The numbers were clean. They obeyed logic. They were mine. My phone, the new one, buzzed once. A news alert. I glanced at it. It was a business brief about partner announcements at Robert's firm. His name was not listed. The names of 2 others were. I deleted the alert. In the late afternoon, I went for a walk along the riverfront path. The air was cool. People passed by, walking dogs, jogging, talking. I was anonymous. A woman in her mid-40s, warm brown skin, observant eyes, walking without hurry. No one looked at me with pity or curiosity. I was just another person. I thought of the house, now empty, waiting for the realtor's sign. I thought of Robert. I did not wonder where he was. I knew the contours of his situation. Temporary housing, diminished resources, a damaged reputation, and the absence of the woman he had planned to build upon. He was in the aftermath. I was in the after. That night, I made a simple meal. I ate it at the table by the window, watching the lights of the city reflect on the water. The silence was full, not empty. It was a silence I owned. As I washed the single plate, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. I checked it later. It was Robert's voice, slurry and broken, a rambling message of blame and pleading and confusion. I saved it. It was not for sentiment. It was evidence, if ever needed, of the state of mind I had left behind. Then I blocked the number. I turned off the kitchen light. The living room was illuminated only by the city glow through the windows. My books were on the shelves. My art was on the walls. Everything in the space had been chosen by me, for me. There were no ghosts here, no echoes of conversations that had been lies. I sat in the armchair and looked out at the dark water and the pinpricks of light. The cold, calculating fury that had fueled the last month had burned itself out, leaving behind a calm certainty. I had not just taken back what was mine. I had reclaimed the person who knew how to do it, the analyst, the strategist, the woman who did not fall apart, but who quietly, methodically rebuilt. By next month, everything will be ours, he had said. He was wrong. By next month, everything was mine. And the month after that would be mine as well. And the one after that. The story of Vivian Hayes was no longer a shared narrative. It was a sole proprietorship. I closed the ledger for the night. The rest of the pages were blank, waiting to be filled.